It was just another dead-end day. I had spent the afternoon sitting across a cheap desk from a manager half my age, listening to her explain how they'd keep my resume on file. I didn't even care anymore. I walked back to my apartment under a gray, heavy sky, another rejection weighing down the stack of them already on my kitchen table. That's when I saw it. A plain cardboard box sitting squarely in the middle of my welcome mat. No return address, no postage stamps, no indication of where it came from. It was just there, like it had materialized out of thin air. I picked it up, half expecting it to be empty, but it had a surprising weight to it. Inside, nestled in crumpled newspaper, was a VHS tape. Not a DVD, not a Blu-ray, but a relic from the past. The label was a mess. Old, cracked red plastic, peeling at the edges, with "Don't Play" scrawled across it in shaky, rushed letters. It was the kind of handwriting you'd expect from someone in a panic. Someone desperate. A wave of unease washed over me. It was all just weird. I hesitated at my doorstep. The silence of my empty apartment pressed in on me. The weight of my loneliness, of my failures, was a crushing presence. At this point, I figured, why not? I muttered to myself, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Wasn't like I had anything better to do. Of course, I didn't own a VCR anymore. Who did? So, I found myself driving across town to a dusty pawn shop, the kind of place where sunlight seems afraid to enter. The guy behind the counter, with his greasy hair and world-weary eyes, looked at me like I'd asked for a dinosaur. But in the back, buried under a pile of dusty electronics, he unearthed one of those old TV VCR combo things. A bulky, beige monstrosity. I paid way too much for it, driven by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. That night, the silence in my apartment was louder than ever. Hours crept by, filled with the echoes of my own self-doubt. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I plugged it in, the screen flickering to life with a buzz of static. I slid the tape into the VCR. There was a whirring sound, a click, and then the screen filled with grainy, distorted footage. It was a first-person recording. The camera was shaky, handheld, and then a man came into view. Young, maybe my age, but he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around the room. Sweat plastered his hair to his forehead. He was breathing heavily, as if he'd just run a marathon. He stared directly into the camera, his gaze intense, pleading. "You have 48 hours after you watch this," he said, his voice rough and trembling. 48 hours to pass it on. Pass what on? The question hung in the air, unanswered. "It doesn't stop," he continued, his voice rising in panic. "You can't destroy it. You can't hide. You can only pass it along." His words were frantic, desperate. There was a raw, visceral fear in his voice that was contagious. It wormed its way under my skin, raising goosebumps on my arms. Then, as abruptly as it began, the tape ended. The screen dissolved into static, then went black. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the room amplifying the pounding of my heart. "What the hell was that?" I muttered, trying to shake off the unease. I told myself it was just some elaborate prank, some student film project gone wrong. But a sliver of doubt remained, a nagging feeling that something was deeply, profoundly wrong. The next day, I tried to forget about the tape. I went to the grocery store, hoping the mundane task would ground me. I was in the canned goods aisle, reaching for a can of soup, when I saw him. It was just a fleeting glimpse. At the very end of the aisle, partially obscured by the shelves, was a figure. Tall, unnaturally thin. It was hard to make out any details in the dim light, but I could feel his eyes on me. Pitch black, devoid of any life or warmth. Just watching. I blinked, and he was gone. I told myself it was my imagination. Stress, lack of sleep. But the image lingered in my mind, cold and unsettling. Later that day, I went to the gym, trying to burn off the nervous energy that had been building inside me. I was on the treadmill, pushing myself harder than usual, when I saw him again. Different clothes this time, but the same figure. Standing motionless in the corner amidst the sweating bodies and clanging weights. The same dead stare. The same unnerving stillness. Again, he was gone in a blink. I scanned the gym, trying to convince myself I was seeing things, but my heart was pounding in my chest. Then, at the gas station, as I was filling up my tank, I saw him reflected in the window of the convenience store, standing by the pump even though there was no one there. Just that dark figure, watching, waiting. It was always the same. A quick, disorienting glimpse, a jolt of pure fear, and then he'd vanish. No one else seemed to notice him. The world went on around me, oblivious to the growing terror that was consuming me. Was I going crazy? With each sighting, he was closer. The first time, he was at the end of the aisle. Then, he was across the parking lot. Then, across the street. Then, at the entrance to a store. He was closing the distance, and I had no idea why. He never moved when I saw him. He just stood there, watching. Always watching. It was the stillness that was so unsettling, the complete lack of any discernible purpose. One time I blinked, and he had moved a few feet closer. Just a subtle shift, but it was enough to send a jolt of pure, icy terror through me. He was getting closer. He was getting closer, and I was starting to unravel. Night was the worst. The darkness amplified my fear, turning every shadow into a potential threat. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart. Every creak of the apartment building, every rustle outside my window, sent a shiver down my spine. I knew he was out there, waiting, watching. That night I saw him under the streetlight outside my window. The light cast long distorted shadows, obscuring his features, but I could still see those black eyes, locked on my apartment. I didn't sleep at all that night, my mind racing with fear and paranoia. The next day was a blur of anxiety and dread. I barely ate, barely spoke. The world seemed to tilt and sway around me, the edges of reality blurring. And then, it hit me. It had been almost 48 hours since I'd watched the tape. 48 hours. The man on the tape's words echoed in my head, a death knell tolling in my mind. 48 hours to pass it on. I was a mess. My nerves were frayed, stretched to the breaking point. Insomnia had turned me into a ghost of myself, my eyes sunken and bloodshot. The figure was everywhere, lurking in the corners of my vision, a constant reminder of my impending doom. Then, he started showing up at my apartment building. I'd see him at the end of the driveway when I came home, his dark silhouette a stark contrast against the fading light. I'd peek through the peephole and see him standing in the stairwell, motionless, an unsettling stillness that defied explanation. Just staring, always staring. And he was changing, getting worse. His features seemed to be distorting, shifting. His eyes were darker, deeper, devoid of any humanity. His limbs seemed too long, too thin, like a grotesque caricature of a human being. He was less and less human, more and more like something else. Panic seized me, a cold, suffocating wave that threatened to drown me. I had to do something. Anything. I had to get rid of the tape. I tried everything. I burned it in the sink, the plastic melting and warping, filling my apartment with acrid smoke. I smashed it with a hammer, the case shattering into pieces. I threw it in the dumpster down the street, hoping it would be lost forever in the sea of garbage. Nothing worked. It kept coming back. It was relentless, inescapable. It would reappear on my kitchen counter, the red label gleaming mockingly in the dim light. I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Despair settled in, heavy and suffocating. I gave up fighting. What was the point? There was no escape, no way out. Then, in the depths of my despair, I remembered the man on the tape's words. Pass it along. It was the only way, the only slim chance of survival. With trembling hands, I found my old camera, the one I used to use for happier times. I set it up in my living room, the red light blinking, a stark reminder of the time ticking away. I pressed record. My voice was weak, shaky. If you're watching this, I began, my throat tight with fear. Please understand, I didn't want to do this. I swallowed hard, my gaze fixed on the camera lens. I'm sorry. I had no choice. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but my hands were trembling uncontrollably. You have 48 hours. Pass it along, or it will come for you too. Suddenly, a deafening bang echoed through my apartment. It sounded like someone was trying to break down my door. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. My voice cracked, fear twisting my features into a mask of terror. I turned to look at the door, frozen in place, the camera still recording. The camera captured my final moments, my eyes widening in disbelief and horror as I stared at the door. The image blurred, the screen flickered violently, and then static. A long moment of blackness, and then my voice, faint and distorted, echoing from the dead screen. If you're watching this, I'm sorry. Then silence.